Welcome, welcome. This is Marnie, and you are here with me and Karen McCracken for a program called You Are Called and Equipped, so stand firm. During this interview, we're going to talk about how to step into your God-given identity, how to shine light on the source of your fears so you can get rid of them, armor up against the lies of the enemy, stand firm in your faith, be courageous and strong, do everything in love, and walk on with your feet, feelings, and future firmly planted on solid ground. Our guest today is Karen McCracken. She's a Christian comedian and author with 25 years of experience speaking at conferences and Christian retreats. She's also been a youth and children's pastor, chaplain, and family peer support specialist. Her Amazon best-selling book, Woman Stand Firm, was just released in 2023. You can learn more about her over at womaninspired.org and invite her to speak over at womenspeakers.com. We're so excited to have you here with us, Karen. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Marnie. It's great to be here. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, well, I've been looking forward to this, and you're one of our featured speakers at womenspeakers.com. You are a comedian, and we aren't going to do comedy so much here today. We're going to be talking about Standing Firm, your new book, and about how if we're not standing firm, we're probably falling down. So
That's right. That's right. Very true. But, I think we've gotten so used to, as a society, feeling like we're shaken and that we're close to falling down, and as if it's no big deal when we have the opportunity to stand firm. And God's word tells us this in so many places. So it's a sad state of culture in many ways, but we have hope. We have that hope.
So you talk a lot about standing in our God-given identity, and I love this topic as well, because I feel like if we don't know who we are and whose we are, then we're just really on shaky ground all the time.
It's true. We are. And, I found out I've spoken to so many venues over the last 25 years and to hundreds and hundreds of women. And there's always a common theme. And a lot of times when women end up just kind of going off the rails and off the tracks and in crisis, they come back to who am I? And they're struggling when all the while who we are is dependent on whose we are. And when we belong to the Lord, it talks right in his word about who we are. But it is a journey for a lot of women. And I think one of the biggest common denominators is if you ask a woman, who are you? One of the first things out of their mouth is they're going to give you a title of something that they do. They're going to define who they are by what they do instead of who they are and whose they are. And it's common. It's a cultural thing. But the problem with that is that those things change. If a woman wraps up her whole identity either in her job title or in, oh, I'm a wife and I'm a mom and this is all that I do, eventually at some point that's going to change. So for the woman who dedicated her whole life to this is my identity, I'm a wife and I'm only wife, what happens when her husband passes? Or if God forbid she gets divorced? She's no longer a wife anymore. So who is she? And so at various stages in our lives, if we don't know who we are and we identify ourselves with a title, then we're just kind of on this, kind of hippie 60s, 70s trek of trying to discover who we are, right? I'm going to go off and find who I am, when all the while, if we knew who we were, as those changes come, we would be able to stand firm through whatever is thrown at us.
So when somebody says to you, Karen McCracken, who are you? What do you say?
So I've also been in that trap. Oh, I'm a wife. I'm a mom. When you my website and you read, Karen is one of the first things is Karen is a Christian speaker, a comedian,
right.
Because these are the titles that we have. But I'm trying really hard to identify myself more and more. When people say, "Who are you?" I want to be able to freely, unabashed say, "I'm a woman of God. I belong to the Lord. I'm a seeker of his love. I want to share his love. I want to be able to identify myself more in spiritual terms and eternal terms instead of fleshly terms." Because wouldn't that be amazing? When I was at my last speaking engagement, I told the women, I said, when someone says, "Hey, who is Sandra?" someone will say, "Oh, well, she's an attorney and she's a mom and all of this." But wouldn't it be great if our first initial reaction would be to say something like, "Oh, she's an amazing woman of God," or
right.
"So faithful. She is wonderful." But we don't think of ourselves in those terms. We think of ourselves in worldly terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I spend so much time on this, just even in my own prayer life with God. I asked him the other day, "Who am I to you?" And he just was like, "Yeah, you're my little joyful joy." That's who he's always telling me. You're my joyful joy. But I have a couple. Descriptions of who I am that I like to play with. So the one I've had for the longest is I am the personal assistant to the King of the universe, and every morning I sit with him in private consultation, and then I run his errands all day long as he provides all the resources, and the pay is great, but the retirement plan is out of this world. I love
I
that one.
love I love that. That's great. That's
And I,
wonderful. I'm gonna have to quote you next time I'm up speaking
yeah.
here in the podcast because that's wonderful.
And last week I got a new one, which just takes my breath away. I am the infatuated bride of Christ.
Oh, wow. I love
Whoa.
that.
And that
Yeah.
just solves all the hassle of me trying to explain why I'm giggling when I'm in excruciating pain or whatever, because I'm just infatuated.
Well, isn't it so, I was on here, I don't know how many years ago, talking about OCD and
Yeah,
being
yeah, yeah.
obsessed. One of the
Yes,
things that I always said is if you can switch your brain, which God made our brains amazing, to focus on that which is healthy and what he defines you as. And so,
right.
so if you're going to obsess on anything, obsess on your relationship with the Lord, obsess on the word of God. And so that's what that makes me think of that when you say infatuated like that. And that's a
Right.
beautiful thing.
It
So many people
is.
are caught up into, because we don't know who we are. So many people don't know who they are. They're depending on social media to tell them who they are, or their roles at work, or to define them. And then that's ever changing too, isn't it? Right? What they
Oh,
say, how a good woman is today is
yeah,
not what a
right.
good woman was 5 years ago, was not, it's ever changing. So
Yeah,
it's like we're ever changing. No, we were made who we were made
right.
to be.
Yes.
And that's where we're supposed to stand firm and be solid. And that's when we won't be shaken, is when we know
Yeah.
who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. You mentioned OCD too, and you have a book on that. And that, you guys, if you have anybody in your life that is OCD, or if you are, you need to get that book. So helpful. And just, it's actually more than just explaining about it. It was a path out. It's like,
Yes.
really helpful,
It
super helpful.
is. And
So I
I
encourage you
described
to read
my
it.
journey as well,
Yeah.
but also,
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of great things that God gave me on
Yeah.
healing from it. And, OCD is less than 5% of my life now, where it was 99% of my life back then. So it still amazes me, still amazes everybody who knows me that it's
And
that
am
way. But
I?
the book is
Yeah.
Breaking Free from OCD, and you can go to my website and click on it to
Yeah.
order it.
And I think, weren't you about 8 when it started for you, when you
Yes.
started really noticing, if
Yes,
I
you have a great
remember
memory.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it impacted me. That was a really
Yeah,
important
was 8. I
conversation.
can
And
remember it all the way back
yeah.
to then.
Yeah.
And the as I got older, and I've realized this since writing the book, I probably ought to write an update, but I've realized since then that the more I identified as who I was with being belonging to the Lord,
Yeah.
um, the less and less the OCD had a hold on me.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's just amazing. When our minds are on the spirit, he is life and peace. And
Yes.
it's so amazing. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So you talk a lot about fears, and the Bible says that Um, there is no fear in love, that perfect love, or in other words, God's love casts out fear. And yet, all through the whole Bible, we hear the phrase, "Oh, don't be afraid." Like, all of us are just afraid all the time, and the
Yeah.
angels or whoever comes and says, "Don't be afraid," it's going to be fine. But sometimes we got these fears that are hanging on us. We can't really seem to overcome them. So address that.
I think the fear is oftentimes one of the reasons why we try to change who we are or define ourselves into something else, because we're afraid to be who the Lord, or we're afraid we're not good enough to
Yeah.
be who the Lord is calling us to do and do what he's calling us to do. I know I had that fear myself. I still occasionally do, and I have to battle it. But the thing is that all fear is based in lie. There's a lie at the core
Yes.
of every single
Right.
fear that we believe. And when we operate out of fear, then we really go off the path that God has for us. And I kind of liken fears when my son was little. he was getting really scared at night. He kept saying there was a vampire in his room. There was a vampire in his room. And so I would go in and I'd say, there is no vampire. So I'd turn on the light and he'd say, yes, yes, there's a vampire over there. Well, I'd turn on the light and it was his coat hanging on the back of the closet
Yep.
door. And so he thought it was that. And so I gave him a flashlight. And so after that, anytime he got scared and he thought there was something in the room, he
Yeah.
would turn the flashlight on and say, oh, it's just my coat, or oh, it's just that sitting on the desk. And that changed everything. And I always think of it that way. If we would
Yeah.
shine the light on what we're afraid of and really see it for what it
Yeah.
is, then it wouldn't have a grip on us. And in the book Women Stand Firm, I go through the armor of God, which many Christians already know about the armor of God. But when you take that armor of God and apply it to a particular situation, including fear, you can dissect and shine the light on what's going on. And it says in Ephesians 6:13, that's where he talks about the belt of truth being buckled around us. And you often hear people say, well, if I had more faith, I wouldn't have fear. That's not true. You can have loads of faith, but still have times where you have fear. So faith is not the opposite of fear. So the truth is the opposite of fear, because truth is where we get our light. It shines the light on the situation and it dispels fear.
Yeah. I love that. There's a saying I learned years ago: everything in the light, so Satan has nothing to use against me in the dark. And that comes back to that truth piece again. Where we are believing lies, where we are telling lies,
Yes. Yes.
hiding things from people, whatever it is, these are the places where we can be easily, succumb to fear. And so as we live a life of integrity in the light of God, those fears have to just fall away. They actually can't survive. I like that analogy. I like to talk about, you're supposed to go across the gymnasium, but the gymnasium is pitch black. And you've never been in this gym, but you have to get from this side door over to the other side door, all the way across the kitty corner. And so how are you walking? You're walking across the gym and you're basically going like little teeny baby steps in case there's a bleacher or chairs. You don't know what's in there, equipment. And so you're just tiptoeing your way across this gymnasium. Whereas if somebody just turns the light on, boom, you can just walk right across. And that's how you can tell the difference. If you're living in fear, you're literally tiptoeing through your life. You're scared something is going to trip you up. You're scared God's not going to be enough. You're scared that you're not going to be enough. Whereas when you're walking in truth, all of a sudden you can just run. You can actually just go. It's okay.
And that's such a great point, because it's not just the lies that we believe, but like you said, it's the lies that we tell.
Yeah.
And I relate that so much to this trap that so many women have gotten into on social media, where what they're presenting themselves as is a lie, because they're afraid not to. They're afraid they're not good enough. So they're going to, whether they change their body or they just change it through a filter. So they change how they look and who they are and what they present themselves on social media. And then they're constantly running and constantly afraid that they'll be found out.
Yeah.
So yes, the truth goes both ways, not just the lies that we believe, but the lies that we tell. So that integrity and walking in truth is hugely important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're afraid, that's the place to go, is check out the truth barometer there. Shine the light of God's word on whatever you're thinking about. See what it is. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. You're talking about earlier about the armor of God and about standing against the lies of the enemy. So is there anything else on this one that you want to go back to before we move on?
I just think it's really important, and it became more and more important to me to understand what the armor of God is, and not just, we tend to think of it when we learn about it about a huge spiritual level and how the armor of God is important to the body of Christ in whole, but we need to apply the armor of God on a very personal level.
Yeah.
And be able to understand it. And there's a lot of great studies out there on the armor of God. I do go into the armor of God in my book. And I've talked about it. I did a study on it, or did it on several different podcast episodes last year, because it's that important. It's just, I hope that everybody can get to the point where they understand that the armor of God is a very personal thing. And it's one of the best things that God ever gave us to utilize to manage this world until he comes and takes us home. It's one of the best things that we have to be able to to have that joyful outlook, to be able to hold on to hope, and to be able to not fear every day.
This is such a foundational thing for me too. I just love the armor of God. And every day when I'm getting dressed physically, I'm getting dressed spiritually. I just take up my shield of faith. Kind of like, for me, it's like a dressing room door.
Yeah.
Slam that thing down in the ground. Then I get dressed, head and shoulders, knees and toes. I just go my helmet of salvation, breastplate of righteousness, belt of truth. I put on my shoes of the gospel of preparation of the peace. And then I pick up my sword, and then I go praying on. And when I first started, it took me over 45 minutes a day to get my armor on because I wasn't used to it. And I was thinking through it all, and it's become, over the years, it's just become part of, as fast as I get dressed physically, I'm dressed spiritually. And it's a reminder of all of these things that God has for us as we're going forward in our day, that he has already equipped us. We have everything we need to win the battle of the day.
Yes, I'm so glad that you said that, because it was, I don't know how long ago, it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I heard you say that exact
Oh,
thing
funny.
in a session, and it has stuck with me ever since.
Yeah.
That, when I get out of bed in the morning, I need to be hopping right into the armor of God. I remember that.
Yeah.
So,
And what was funny for me, my sister, I think I told at the time, but I often tell this story with it. My sister was traveling all over the world, and she had gone to the Arab Emirates, and she was an executive, and they were going to invite her to a party that night. So they would pick her up in the lobby at 5 p.m. So she got her little black dress on and her black heels and hose and all that. And she's at the door at 5 o'clock, and they pick her up in the limousine, and they're driving out into the desert. And she's like, where in the world are we going? And when they get there, she realizes she has come to a pool party. It was at a swimming pool, and it wasn't appropriate to be dressed in black heels and hose and all that. And I said, oh my goodness. She's telling me this from the airport, we're talking on the phone. I said, what did you do? And she goes, oh, I just made light of it. She said it was just a mistake. It was no big deal. She said, I was just so glad I didn't go to a ballroom in a bikini. And I thought, really, honestly, I would rather overdress in the armor than underdress in the armor and go out into the world naked,
Yes. Absolutely.
So, it takes a couple minutes, but it's so worth it. And one of the pieces of the armor is the shield of faith. And I remember years ago talking to one of my mentors, and I said, when I started this thing, I did what I just told you, I took my shield of faith and I just slammed it in the ground, and it was in front of me enough to be like a little dressing room. And then as I went and as I kept taking up my armor every day, that shield of faith grew so big that I can no longer see the outside edges of my shield of faith. It's gigantic. That's huge. Beautiful. Right. And we get to stand in this faith that is believing that God exists and that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
Yes. That's wonderful.
Did you have any other thoughts about the faith, the shield, or faith?
I think we were going to talk about standing firm in your faith.
Yes.
I just wanted to share. So, there's so many places in the Bible that tell us to stand firm, including in Ephesians, where it talks about the armor of God. But one of my favorite scriptures is from 1 Corinthians 6:13, where it says, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous and be strong. There's so many times where we don't feel like we can be courageous and be strong. I love to encourage women to remind them that you don't have to be strong on your own, and that your strength comes from the Lord. And that courage is actually facing something and doing something, even if you don't feel brave enough or strong enough to do it. It doesn't mean that you go in unafraid. It doesn't mean that you go in without your knees knocking and your teeth chattering. Yes. But you do it anyway. And if you're called to do it, that God's going to be right there in the middle of it with you, including if that means changing who you are a little bit, not because you are trying to be what the world wants you to do, but peeling back those layers of what the world said you should be, so that and sometimes it's frightening. We kind of hold on to this identity or these things that we do or these titles that we have because it's comfortable, even though it's sometimes frightening. We hold on to those and think we're protecting ourselves, when really, if we would let go of those and really walk into who the Lord calls us to be and who he said we should be, that's when we get to stand firm. So, and it takes courage. We can't do it alone. We just really can't. We're just human. We can't do it alone. And it says in 1 Corinthians 15:58, 58. It says, friends, stand firm and don't be shaken. Always keep busy working for the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do when you're trying to please everybody else except God. And so that's why it's so important for me. It just kind of has been solidified the last couple of years. I don't need to be a people pleaser. I need to be a Jesus pleaser.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the phrase audience of one. I was just singing a song God had given me a couple of years ago this morning. I live for an audience of one. I live for God's only son. Just this audience of one where, of course, we want everybody to like us and to think what we're doing is awesome. I mean, that's of course true. But at the end of the day, it's God's well done that I'm looking for. And if I get that, then no matter who else said what, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yes.
I'm going to be all right. Yeah. Okay. Courageous and strong and doing everything in love.
That's not always easy to do. But when we're walking with the Lord and he's in us, it's so much easier to do to see things through his eyes. I know it says love your neighbor as you love yourself in the Bible. And unfortunately, we've come to a place, I've met so many women who don't love themselves. And so when you don't love yourselves, you don't know how to extend love to other people. Where so many people expect us to be perfect that we're then judging other people. Why aren't they perfect too? Social media says, look like this, do this. So you should act this way in order to be, even in the church, in order to be a particular, you have to be a certain kind of church woman, look a certain way, always say the right thing, which is not true. And I think even as Christian women in the church, sometimes we get lost in that. And so it's hard when we're not operating from a place of love to show other people love. So I think tackling the fact that we really are supposed to love ourselves, not edify ourselves, not make ourselves an idol, but truly love the fact that, hey, this is who God made me to be. I have a purpose. He's blessed me in ways, even when I have struggles and chaos and trauma, I'm still blessed and I'm still his. And I love who I am and I love who he made me to be. Then you are more able to really love neighbors as you love yourself. That's what we're supposed to do. And I think the foundation for that comes from first loving God and knowing that you are loved.
Right. Absolutely. When I think about the greatest commandment there, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. I count 9 times in that commandment where he uses the word you. So you love the Lord your God with all your mind, all your strength. It's 9 times. If you don't start with you, we actually can't give away something we don't have. It's not possible. If I don't have money, I can't share money with you. If I don't have grace, I can't share grace with you. If I don't have love, I can't share love with you.
Right.
We have to start.
Yes.
With experiencing God's love.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I have seen many things the last couple of years saying that if you love yourself, you're selfish.
No.
If you take care of yourself, there's self-care, self-love, so important. Yeah. Like you said, you can't give of what you don't have.
You actually can't. And it's a false humility. It's a false humility to say, I'm going to beat myself down so I can lift God up. No, he's the one that made the commandment with you first. You love the Lord your God. And it's like, it isn't because we're above God. It's because he knows exactly, like if I get sick, I cannot serve because I am being served. Right. When I am sick, I am being served. I am not serving. When I don't love myself, I am not loving. I'm actually needing love. And so as we accept his love and live in that love, then we're able to share that. And it does change everything to know who God is and how loving he is and that he really loves you.
It does. Yeah. Absolutely.
The last one we're going to talk about here is walking with our feet, feelings, and future firmly planted on solid ground.
Part of when I was wrapping up the book, and this is what's so much on my mind because it just came out, and I spent, as you know, it becomes so much. You breathe for so long. Although now I'm trying to switch my mode because I'm writing my next book.
Of course.
Yeah. So it's come into a series. So the next book is Woman Let Go, Release the Grip of Unforgiveness.
Wow.
So, but when I talk about making sure you're firmly planted on solid ground. Okay, of course, we started out talking about making sure you're not shaken, and we have to have that solid ground. And Psalm 140 is one of my favorite scriptures, and it talks about waiting patiently for the Lord to help you, and how he can turn he'll turn to you when he hears your cry. And there's a part that says, He lifted me out of the pit of despair and out of the mud and the mire, and He set my feet on solid
Solid
ground
ground.
and steadied me as I walked along. And a big part of that hit me, besides being on solid ground, is that He steadied me. So when I feel like, okay, I'm shaky and I can't do this, it says, as I walked along. That means you keep moving forward. That
Yeah.
means you're not just standing there waiting to be pummeled and waiting for the enemy to take you down and push you down, and for things to shake out of control and you fall. You keep walking forward, but He will steady you as you do. And to me, that talks about faithfulness. Um, if you are going forward and you're not getting caught up just in your feelings, because our feelings can change from one minute to the next.
Yeah.
Oh, they said this about me on social media, or my family and friends hurt my feelings, or this, and it's so easy to do because we're human and we all have that. But when we're firmly planted on solid ground, He's going to be there. Everything gets shaky, He will steady you. You just keep walking and moving forward as He calls you to move forward.
Right. Absolutely. I love it. I love that we can trust this God, that we can trust this God and
Yes.
just lean right into Him. And He's always faithful. He's always faithful. I loved your words here too. Feet, feelings, and future firmly planted. A lot of times we can have one or two of those, maybe where we're trusting God, but not the third. And one of the things that always surprises me is how fast I am to trust God with my eternity, and how much harder it is to trust Him with today.
Yes.
Like, why
Yes.
is that?
I
Eternity is
know.
way bigger,
I have to
way more
constantly
important.
remind myself, okay, wait a minute. This is the God who spoke
Yeah,
into and creation was here.
yeah.
This is the God that has the sun every day and the moon at night. And I don't have to
Keeps
worry
us
about
spinning.
what air I
Right,
breathe. It's just
right,
going to be there. All the things that He controls.
right,
And I think that He can help me through this problem today. Yeah.
right.
Isn't it so human, isn't it? We do.
It is.
We
It's
tend to do that. But we have to remind ourselves, that's,
yeah,
again, one main reason to stay in the Word,
it
to
is.
stay
Stay
armored up,
connected.
and
Yep.
to make sure that you put that armor on every day,
Yep.
because then we understand, okay, wait a minute, no, He is here.
Constant fellowship, right? Just that
Yep.
air of prayer. So I like to tease around sometimes and say, I wonder if you're up to this. Like,
I think I'd be afraid to do that. Be like, and he might say, are you up to this?
there's that guy in the Bible that comes up to Jesus, and he's his son. The disciples couldn't cast out the demon, and his son is just in torment. And he says, "Well, Jesus, if you can," and Jesus says to him, "If I can, of course I will."
Yeah.
And it's like that same. Sometimes I'll be like, I don't know. I've been praying about this for a while and thinking about it for a while, and I don't know if you're up to it. It's like, yeah, just come on already.
You're a
I
very
am.
woman, Marnie.
Well, I just have, I think it's a good point though. I just have such a real relationship with God. He isn't scary to me.
Thank
I
you.
respect Him and honor Him so much. But I also play with Him. I also just enjoy Him and play with Him. And I still remember the day I was 365 miles away, and my dad was going to get taken off life support that day to see if
Mm.
he could survive or not. And I couldn't be there. And I was just desperate. I was so worried. And I knew about the time of day that they were going to take him off the life support. And I was just wringing my hands, and I was just, God help my dad, God help my dad, God help my dad. And he just came into my thoughts with this picture of the God of heaven pacing like I was, back and forth, wringing his hands. Oh, I just don't know how this is going to turn out. And it actually cracked me up, Karen. I actually burst out laughing, and I'm like, right, no, you are not doing this. I am not with you right now. I'm with my own thoughts, but I'm not with you and your thoughts. You are peaceful and calm, and I am distraught. So, it was kind of at that point after that day that I was like, God is playful. He can even sometimes just show me the craziest thing in the most intense moment that can just relieve the pain.
Well, He gave you a picture of what He saw.
He
and how
did.
he thought, and
Yeah.
he does that, and it
Yeah.
is amazing. But I think we have to, you talked about joy and how
Yeah.
God, your definition of yourself, and I think that it's so important to embrace the joy and to embrace the hope and the laughter. And I
Yeah.
feel so intensely sad for people who cannot laugh at just sometimes the absurdity and the irony. I mean, he
Right.
has to have a sense of humor. I
Oh,
mean,
he
my
does.
goodness.
Look at
Um,
a giraffe.
I
Trust me.
love to I love to laugh. I love to be,
Yep.
just kind of sharp on it. You never know what's going to come out of my mouth. I warn people when I get up to speak. God's given me an outline. I have it looks like 50 pages here, but I have no idea what's going to come out of my mouth. I'm just telling you. I don't know.
But it's usually really good. That's what I know.
That's definitely him.
Oh, well, you guys totally want to go check out Karen's website, which is over at womaninspired.org. When they get over there, what are they going to find, Karen?
They're going to find information about several different topics that I speak on. They'll find links to my podcast, links to where you can order different books. I do have an events page, which I'm in the process of updating. So thankfully, it's getting pretty full for 2024. So if somebody wants to message me and find out if I'm available for their event, now's a good time for 2024. So especially
Awesome.
through the spring and summer, we're starting to get really busy. So, but I'm
Awesome.
here and available, and I have a passion to do it, and I appreciate it.
It's so fun. COVID was a long, quiet break there, and it's so fun to see everybody getting back together and having events and
It is.
having speakers in. So that's great. You can always find her over at womenspeakers.com as well. Thank you so much for being here, Karen.
Oh, thank you, Marnie. It's been a blessing, and I've so enjoyed it.
Thanks. And you guys, thank you for being here. It's so fun to do these and to just learn and grow together. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you